I don't think I've had 1 hour of training in psychotherapy. I've listened to people, I've learned from a lot of teachers, but I've not had formal training as such. And then as my books came out and I gave workshops and so on, and I started working with groups and group therapy and individuals and so on, it really emerged that I did have a bit of a gift for it. Well, the point of compassion inquiry is precisely to drill down to those core stories that people tell themselves. Is to actually get them to see what story they're telling themselves unconsciously, what those beliefs are, where they came from, and show them, guide them to the possibility of letting go of those stories, or letting go of the hold that those stories have on them. So that's what compassionate inquiry is. It's simply a method of drilling down. When I say drilling, I don't mean like a dentist, although pain can come up. But the difference between this method and the dentist is that the dentist necessarily causes pain in the course of their work, and so most often they numb people before they do their work. Well, here it's the opposite. It's not that we cause pain, but pain may emerge. And we don't want you to be numb. If the pain emerges, we want you to feel that pain. Not that we want to cause you pain. There's going to be no effort here to cause anybody pain. However, the assumption is that we don't have to cause it, it's already there. And very often the stories we tell ourselves are attempts to get away from the pain. I mean, I'm talking about the conscious stories, to get away from the pain, or someone to manage it. And those efforts to manage the pain, not to feel it, then are the basic cause of illness. Whether physiological illness, well, all illnesses are physiological, but whether the obviously identified illnesses like autoimmune disease, neurological illness, from multiple sclerosis to amyotrophic lateral sclerosis to fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, Crohn's disease, chronic skin conditions, these all have unresolved and unrecognized emotional underpinnings. And in my view, those underpinnings are rooted very strongly in a person's childhood. And they told about one study that didn't surprise me at all, but it was striking. They studied parents' relationship to one another, whether it was a working, satisfactory relationship between the two parents, or whether it was conflictual and laden with tension and stress. So they studied that in two ways. They interviewed the parents, they interviewed the adults, the couple, and they also collected for 24 hours the urine of their 4-year-old children. And they measured over 24 hours the excretion of cortisol, the stress hormone, in the child's urine. And they could equally tell from the parents' story, the parents' interview, as from the child's urine, the cortisol, which marriages were unhappy and which were not. Now that's the degree. Now I can tell you that high levels of cortisol are behind a lot of illness. But so when I say that things are rooted in childhood, they really are, not just in the sense of emotional dynamics and the stories we tell ourselves, but even very often in our very physiology. And so compassion inquiry is one particular method, not the only one. And it's not so much a method as an approach. It doesn't displace other methods. A lot of great methods out there, a lot of great teachers out there, but it's an approach to drilling down to what's really real inside you. Where the spiritual bypass aspect comes in, well, it's illustrated by somebody who came and talked to me on Thursday evening. I gave a talk in Vancouver on addiction, and a woman came up to me and she told me she's had cancer 3 times. She is the type that just can't say no, that is always succumbing to other people's demands and expectations. And this woman fit the type, and she says, I can't stop doing it. I can't say no. I can't say no, for example, to my boss's expectations. He says, I don't understand it. I've been chanting 2 hours a day for 20 years. She's been doing spiritual work, without which her life might be a lot more difficult, might be a lot less balanced. Nevertheless, she's still unable to utter the word no, despite 20 years of chanting. Well, that's spiritual bypass. That's where you do the spiritual work, and you might attain great states of even oneness, or peace, serenity, joy. So, what better thing than to combine the inquiry about spiritual bypass and compassionate inquiry? How many of you here have had a spiritual practice of some kind? Well, most of you do. And it may be true for you that it has really transformed your life, and it can even be true that it has transformed your life, but not in certain areas. And where the spiritual work has not transformed your life sufficiently, it could be for 2 reasons. Maybe you haven't practiced well or long enough, or maybe there's an emotional side that you haven't dealt with. Maybe there's some truth that you haven't yet glimpsed or known what to do with. And that's what the compassionate inquiry. Complements the spiritual work. Generally, when we do compassionate inquiry, Sadharma and I, we do it for therapists, teaching it as an approach that they can apply in their practice. Let me mention here that there will be at times when some heavy emotions may come up. When I say heavy emotions, I literally mean emotions that are hard to bear and, hard to carry. That's okay. In fact, it's probably a sign of lack of depth on our part if that doesn't happen for some of you. Not that we intend to cause it, it's just that it's going to happen. So let's just talk about right now about what happens and how to manage it if that happens for you. So first of all, there's nothing wrong. If you get triggered, that's the buzzword these days, that's perfectly all right. So let's just develop or lay out some strategies as to what to do if that happens. And then, at the next opportunity, if you feel like it, talk to somebody. One of your friends, but just talk to somebody. So that's what to do if you do get triggered. And I might as well say one more thing about this word triggered. But when you think about the word trigger, and of course nobody should go out of their way or deliberately or insensitively trigger anybody else. That's an easy game to play. But on the other hand, for the person being triggered, you might want to consider what a trigger actually is. So the metaphor comes from what? It comes from weaponry. It comes from, instruments of war. And the trigger actually is a very small part of the mechanism. In the gun or the rifle or the pistol or the revolver, machine gun, there's a whole mechanism to deliver the ammunition. There's the ammunition itself. There's something explosive that will propel the ammunition to its target. Then there's a trigger which is this big. Whenever you get triggered, somebody pulled that trigger, perhaps. But who's the one carrying the ammunition? Who's the one with the mechanism to deliver the ammunition? Who's the one with the explosive material inside them? And where do you want to put your attention? You want to put your attention on the trigger purely? Or are you curious about what ammunition, what explosive material you're carrying inside? So triggers are really great to work with if you want to get to know yourself. And if you don't want to get to know yourself, then what we usually do is we just resent whoever did the triggering, and that we think they did this to us. So compassionate inquiry is really all about finding out what the ammunition is. Now, how you handle people who trigger you, that's your call. But at least know that you're the one with all the explosive inside you. And you gain so much liberation if you find out what that ammunition is and how you got it, and whether you can really diffuse it. Like you diffuse a bomb, you can actually diffuse that ammunition inside you through getting to know yourself. And that's where freedom actually lies. If nobody had the power to trigger you, not because you were closed down and shut down and isolated, but because you're totally aware of yourself. Well, that's where liberation actually is. And that's what all the spiritual teachers, I believe, want to educate people to do in their particular way. Here we do it differently. Here we do what I would call the archaeology of the mind. The archaeology of the mind. Where our job is, the archaeologist has got some very fine tools, and they're very careful. They don't just dig in there with their big shovel and apply force. It's more like a very gentle dusting off of tiny little objects and looking at them, what it's really about, and seeing how they all fit together. And maybe what were broken fragments really are a beautiful vase once the archaeologist has finished their work. And in this case, you're being invited to be your own archaeologist of the mind,